right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, The Evolution of the Black Female Character in Fiction and Romance Fiction. And I'm going to get our PowerPoint up and give me just a moment to do that. And I'm going to ask my panelists to let me know um, if everything is panelists. Also, I want to also remind people to send me, and that will be monitored and not the chat. Panelists, let me know if we're good. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Let me see what I may be. Okay. All right. What about now? Are you all seeing it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Great. All right. I'm Gerald Moore. I am an adult services librarian and a branch manager with Charleston County Public Library. I've been with the library. I'm celebrating 25 years this year. And for much of my life, I have been an avid reader. So I'm in good company this morning, and I'll be moderating today's session. I am excited to introduce our esteemed list of featured panelists. We have Belinda Miller. She is the owner of Turning Page Bookshop and also a member of the Charleston Friends of the Library. We have Deborah Jones Wheeler. Deborah is a former educator, and she is now a children's services manager and creative studio coordinator with Charleston County Public Library. Maya Hollenshed is also she's an adult services librarian with Charleston County Public Library. Maya is also a blogger. Her handle is the Reading Diva, and she sometimes moonlights as a publicist. Belinda, at some point, drop your website for Turning Page Bookshop in the chat. And Maya, you may want to drop your information so that people can reach you on your blog. So we're going to get started. Today's presentation is a panel discussion centered around the Black females' characters, evolution in fiction, and characterizations in romance. The conversation will address how there is much more to Black stories and lives than pain and hard times. Black romances reveal this and particularly can be deeply and unapologetically Black, as well as relatable without highlighting the struggles. And so we're going to start with our first question for our panel. And I'll be alternating between the panelists. Belinda, we're going to start with you. So if the other panelists could mute themselves while Belinda is talking. The first question is, from your perspectives as readers, what can you say about the characteristics of the Black female in romance fiction? How has it changed and how has it evolved? Belinda.
Well, good morning, Gerald, and thank you. Black romance has changed to me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Want to make sure. Black romance has changed drastically, especially in the last 5 years. We've always had Black romance as early as the 1930s and 40s, but they were more on Blacks having romance with in the background, whereas the white audience was looking at the ones in the front. I mean, the Blacks were always the friends of the white romance lovers. Harlequin romance had, for many years, romance, but the African American female was always in the background as the best friend. In the last 10 years, they have come to the forefront, and we have always had Black romance writers, especially Christian ones. And I'm glad that somebody like Zane and Terry McMillan and those other authors in the last 15 and 20 years have been able to explode on their romance. So it is a growing genre. It is huge. And for Black romance, we need more of that, especially now in 2022.
All right. Thank you, Belinda, for those comments. Deborah, would you give us your perspective, please?
I'm going to give my perspective a little bit from when I first started reading Black romance, which I think is an important point to make. When I first read seriously, I think Black female romance, I was probably in high school. I was reading those Harlequin romances presentation, and I had had no interest in romantic books before because they simply weren't available for me. And when, of course, I started reading these, it was really interesting to have Black characters as the main characters and sometimes still not feel like they were really relevant, if that makes sense. We were reading the books to kind of get that feeling of mostly lust in high school, but the characterizations still weren't that great. I definitely feel that many authors have gotten better about that now. And I think it's because more people have been exposed to Black females in different situations that they feel like they can write them better as real people. So I definitely think that before it was something where people were writing things, companies were publishing things, I probably should say better, and pushing it out to a Black audience, but it still wasn't really written for us. It was written for us to buy, if that makes sense. So I do think that the characterization has changed to really actually focus on Black females in romance now.
Very good, Deborah. And Maya, would you give us your perspective, please?
Kind of picking back what Deborah and Belinda said, it has really evolved within the last, even the last 5 years, where it's evolved. And like I said, it was pretty much before writing just to say, oh, we're just pushing it out to the Black readers and they'll just read anything. Now it's more nuanced where it's not only just the African American readers, but you're also getting readers from other ethnicities and nationalities as well. The characteristics as before, as you can see in Marilyn Morgan, they may have just had the regular, typical jobs that most females had. Teacher or nurse. Now you see more doctors and lawyers and business owners, and even, those are in politics. So it has really, really evolved, and women are more like independent, and the man is more, he accompanies her life as opposed to, she needs a man or whatever. So I think it's really evolved and showed not only the evolution of Black women in romance, but just Black women moving up professionally in general.
Good, great. I want to just toss in there too, just the fact that there's a lot of historical romance fiction now, and I know that a lot of that can be contributed to the marvelous Beverly Jenkins, and then there are some others, a wealth of others, but I'm seeing a lot of that now, or a return to that, where people of color being featured in the different time and periods, if you will, where as maybe we grew up and we didn't have those images, or that knowledge that, hey, we were a part of those stories too. During those times. But thank you all. We'll move on to our next question. So, and if a reader does not identify as a person of color, why should they read diverse romance? And Deborah, we'll start with you with that question.
This is a question I actually normally answer as a children's services manager. Obviously, we have a wealth of materials in the children's section because we want to expose them as early as possible to other cultures. But I do generally get the question, depending on which branch you're in or what area, what community you're in, you may not get a lot of African-American children in your story times or your programs, for example. So then folks ask, why are we, using this book of, Black children or Black poetry in our story time? And the answer obviously is because just because there aren't any Black people with you right now doesn't mean that they don't exist and that you don't need to know about them. And then if this is the only way you're interacting with them, then you definitely need the exposure. So it's the same thing for any title, really. If you don't have exposure to those folks, how else would you get it if you don't read it? And if you do have exposure, there's nothing wrong with having even more. That makes you understand even more and maybe even interact even more and communicate even more. So this isn't something where one group has to do this because it's a homework or something like that. Most of us know the Black experience. This is really for other folks, and it's really for us to express our experience as widely as possible so that an audience as wide as possible can really understand it.
Very good. Thank you, Deborah, for those comments. Maya, would you give us your answer, please?
My answer is similar to Deborah's. Just because you may not see us doesn't mean that we don't exist. People should read diverse romance because, as you see right now, as people are going to ban books that they think that is only one way, everything should be Anglo-Saxon and that's it. But we are just more than, and we are not a monolith either. We have lives. We experience joy. We experience pain. We experience love. That's why they should read diverse romance and show that we are human too. We are a part of your neighborhood just like everybody else. And I think that will also bridges a way for people to bring more understanding, because one thing that does bring people together is books, and that will help them understand that it's it's more than just me. I'm getting this different perspective, and they're just like us. Mm-hmm. And that will make me sympathize with them in their struggles, and and maybe it will also encourage them to be allies for us and to support us in any possible way we can as we go through this particular moment of, I don't want to say struggle, but because we're having another reckoning right now. It started pretty much in 2020 and it's still going on. Mm-hmm. So maybe hopefully books will help with that. And not only the anti-racism book, but hey, if they read a regular fiction book or even a romance book, that will help too.
Very good. Yes, and I totally agree with that assessment. Belinda, please give us your perspective.
Well, I think Deborah and Maya covered it. And one thing I want to add is it's a story. It shouldn't matter who's on the cover. It shouldn't matter what color is on the cover. What should matter is what's in the story and how the person wrote the book and how it relates to you.
Yeah.
whether you black, white, blue, or green, or LIGB, whatever it is. It's the story. It's the meat of the story that relates to you and to everybody else in your surrounding area. And like Deborah said, the more you know about different types of races and cultures and what they eat, what they love, what they do, the more you become a well-rounded human being.
Great responses, panelists. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our next question. And I'd like for you all to discuss the concept of Black women as heroines in romance fiction. And Maya, we're going to start with you this time.
The concept of Black women as heroines. Because a lot of people, some people dismiss Black women. We're often called as the mule of the world, that we carry on all of these issues, we're carrying our families, we're carrying the country, we're, in any different type of way, but, we're more than just that. Like I said, there are women who are covering as business owners. There are women that are being covered as in historical fiction, helping the Union, or using the Civil War, helping the Union win the war for emancipation. There are women who are also, involved in their communities and stuff. So it may not be, they saved a child from a burning fire, but there are different kind of heroines in the book where we can see that we are just more than the mammy or the maid or something like that. We have careers where chefs, we're librarians, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're business owners. So I just think that, showing women that are accomplished, that's what's showing in Jasmine's quote here, shows that, like I said, we are more than what the media portrays us.
Very good. Thank you, Maya. Belinda, would you give us your thoughts on the concept of Black women as heroines in romance fiction?
Black women have been heroine romance books since the beginning of time. And it's just that other society has seen Black women as not, they're too strong, they're too loud, they're too colorful. But that is what makes us unique. That is what makes Black women who they are today. So when you're reading a romance novel of a strong Black woman who decides to, as Maya says, start a business or run her own company, whatever it is, you're seeing that more and more now, but they've been doing that for over 40 years. It's just that they never show Black women as heroes in some of these Black romance, and they have always been heroes since the beginning of time.
Yes, I agree. And Deborah, could you give us your thoughts, please?
Well, I'm going to chime in on Belinda about Black women always being heroes, but we all know that they haven't been portrayed that way. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to note that there was an actual push to make sure that Black women were not seen that way, in writing, of course, but that came from society. It's a duality that we were portrayed as hard workers, asexual almost, but on the other hand being too sexual. So it's the Madonna versus the whore duality that folks talk about. And that was a concerted push in society, in media, in newspapers, in art, to portray that characterization of Black women. I think that having a Black woman as a heroine requires that you see them as central, which is still not something that is common for most people to think about. We are almost always an addendum in fiction. We are the sidekick, the sassy person, the comedian, all that. And even when sometimes we are portrayed as the heroine, the main character, we can be overshadowed. I think it's important to note that because we keep saying that Black women are people, something that we shouldn't have to reiterate, but when we talk about heroines and what that actually means, the heroine doesn't necessarily have to be, the magic user in a fantasy or paranormal. They don't have to be the warrior who's, the person who's bearing a sword on the cover. I use a lot of fantasy since that's more my area. I actually have a listing here from some folks who sent me some things for this panel, which just kind of goes on, and it's interesting what they want to see, which is what they're not seeing right now. So some of the suggestions were, can we please see happily childless Black women? Can we see Black women traveling the world? Can we see Black women in period pieces that aren't about slavery? Can we see Black women storytellers? Can we see Black women rockers? And I think we could go on and on and on down this list.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. I'm going to have to agree with Deborah.
Yeah, we're still not seeing what we want to see.
Not enough. Not enough.
One of the things, sorry, go ahead, Melinda.
Oh, yeah. And you know what, Deborah? I like to bring up another point. In the early 40s and 50s and the 60s, they did publish books by white women and white men, and they used to call them Negro romances or colored romances. I happen to know that because I remember my mother had an old book with a faded color, and I think I still have it. In those romances, the women was at home taking care of the children while the husband worked. And it was, I guess you call it the 1950s, 60s movies where, the white women worked at home and the husband went to work at a big corporate, whatever he did. But they had a lot of books by white women and white men. And I have reached out to some of those publishers to say, you better bring those books back and give it to a Black woman so she can give you the Black perspective of what it was like to be a happily married woman with 2.3 kids that society says you should have. And she has a Black man that she gets up and fixes breakfast for him and he goes to work. And there was nothing wrong with that. So we need not only that, we need women who travel all over the world, by themselves or with friends, women who travel to conferences or they have their own businesses, like Maya said. That's a very good point. We need to see more of that on the cover. But I couldn't believe that there was a book that says Negro romance. And that's what it was. But it wasn't written by a Black woman. I suspect it was written by a Black woman because I'm still doing research on that. They just put a white woman's name.
Highly likely.
Yeah, we may want to do some research on that. Negro romance and color romance. That was the book cover. I saw that and almost fell out on the floor. That's embarrassing.
Thank you for sharing that, Belinda. Deborah, did you have anything else to share on that particular?
Maya and I've had this discussion before. Sorry, Joe, I spoke over you. Maya and I had this discussion before where we talked about the reversal of roles for Black women, specifically that in so many romance stories, it's the softness that goes towards the main character. That character is generally white. If you have a Black female as the main character, generally speaking, they're not necessarily treated with softness. What that means is that they can be treated softly, like this person wants to take care of them, but that's very different from respecting someone and understanding that they can take care of themselves and that you are an addition to that they deserve that care, but they don't need that care from you. And so what we called it was kind of the princess syndrome, where other characters, other white female characters, who have been treated as the princess in different stories and different media all want to kind of say, oh, we need to be independent. Black women don't need no man. It's like, but Black women are like, but we want to be treated like princesses because we weren't before. So that is revolutionary for us. So it's really important that people take the term heroine and really use it in context.
Because they should be treated as princesses and queens. They don't get that enough. Very true.
Yeah, we deserve love as much as everybody else does.
Exactly. Exactly. We deserve as much. And we have the same problems, the same issues as everybody else because we're human.
Exactly.
Exactly. Ladies, I'm loving the discussion. I'm loving it. This is great. Y'all dropping some gems. So, this question, I want you all to kind of think personally. And Belinda, we're going to start with you. When was the first time you saw yourself as a Black woman in a romance novel? And what was that experience like for you?
Well, I'm from Washington, D.C. And when Terry McMillan's first book came out, Lord, it slipped my mind. Maya, what's the name of her first book? It slipped my mind.
Is it Mama?
Mama. When Mama came out,
Her first book
the first one was called Mama.
It was called Mom.
When Mama came out, I was on the bus going home from downtown DC to Northeast DC. And on that bus, which held about 25, 30 people, every single Black woman had that book in their hand reading it. DC exploded when that book came out. We were so happy to see a Black woman going through the same struggles we are, raising kids, having some problems with the jobs, with the racism that's going on. That was the first time, other than my own family members, that to see a Black woman on the cover of that magazine, or on the cover of a book. Now, a couple of years before, I did see a picture, and I like how Deborah will bring this to point, a picture of a Harlequin romance book from, oh my God, years ago. And in the background was a white girl's friend. But as you dig further and further, she wasn't just a friend. I think she was a part of the household. And there was something in the background saying how she is a happily married woman. So that was the first time I could relate to a Black woman in a romance novel. That was very explosive to me. That was eye-opening.
Very interesting, Belinda, and we are going to talk about the impact of Terry McMillan later in the presentation. I would venture to just throw in that in the industry, even though Terry has included relationships and romance in her stories, she is not particularly defined as a romance fiction writer. But again, I do think that we have to talk about her contribution to just Black fiction and how it has influenced romance and romance fiction as well. But thank you, Belinda, for sharing that story. Deborah, would you please give us your response to the question?
I'll go back in part to my response to the first question. As I said, I didn't really become exposed to romance until probably late high school, college. Like I said, I was a fantasy person, and I was a quiet child, kept so by my mother, so I wasn't reading all these things until I got a little bit older. And I will say again that probably the first thing I read was an African American romance from Harlequin. I will tell you that I do not remember the name of that title, which probably tells you how good that title was. So I would say more when I actually was becoming a grown woman, college and afterwards was probably the first time I really, really read things where I felt like the characters were real and weren't basically just literal blackface on white characters, as we talked about before. What was interesting for me was that I saw myself as a Black woman in their struggles. I don't think I still necessarily felt as if I was seeing myself in other things. And that was the point where we were talking about where we still didn't have everybody in these different careers, for example. So those kinds of struggles I wasn't a part of. We didn't have folks in the same situations historically. So those things I wasn't a part of. I was a young woman in her late 20s struggling to figure out what she wanted to do with her life because she hadn't figured it out in college. And a lot of the folks in those titles actually kind of knew what they were doing. So I saw myself reflected as in I'm here and I have struggles, but I didn't necessarily feel like I understood the same struggles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Good. And finally, Maya, when was the first time you saw yourself as a Black woman in a romance novel? And what was that like for you?
I remember reading a romance back in the late 80s, early 90s. Scholastic had these clean historical romance to segue for teens. And I was looking it up or whatever within the last couple of days getting ready for this panel. And I believe the girl's name was Cassie. And I was reading, I really enjoyed the book and read some of the others. She was the only Black one, and she was a slave in the book. But it was getting, I think, close to the emancipation, and she fell in love. But that was really like one of the first like kind of romances I saw. And as a teenager, literally, I tell people sometimes I went from reading Babysitter's Club and Stony Brook, and I know we discussed Terry is not romance, to reading Disappearing Acts and Wait to Exhale, because not even, there wasn't really that much Black romance as I was growing up in the 90s. I was not a, there was even then, there wasn't Angie Thomas. There wasn't a Jason Reynolds and stuff. It was pretty much just Walter D. Myers and probably one or two more, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find really, really good. And then luckily, as I got into late high school, early college, and it was after the Wait to Exhale boom, that's when you start seeing a little bit more. I remember reading Good Hair and being disappointed by it. I remember reading Tina Ansa and kind of not really relating to it because I was still in my late teens. That was also when I think Napoli Ever After came out. So it started to be like a little bit of a merge. It's like, but I did grow up in middle class, even though I am a child. My mom was a single parent, but my mom rose from the ranks and became a principal. And I really didn't see that kind of reflection. I had like uncles who were architects and business owners, and that even then it wasn't really reflected. So now reading romance, I'm starting to see that now, as opposed to when I was close to 30 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was, transitioning from high school to college. And it's probably been within the last maybe 5 or so years, I'm probably really seeing what is reflected of me, because, for a while, there was, in the early 2000s, Zane got big, and, the erotic got big, and then it went to the urban lit. And of course, I didn't see myself that way because, like I said, I had a middle class life. And as within the last couple of years, I really kind of see more of the middle class African American life that I grew up and that is more related. Because I do tell people I probably grew up more like the Huxtables, even though I had a single mom, than the Evanses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, I'm gonna move us on to our. Go ahead, Maya. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm done.
Maya.
Oh,
I'm
Maya,
here.
you're muted. Okay, there you go.
I'm here. I was done.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you all for those comments. We'll move on to the next question. So, I think maybe in a lot of ways you all have maybe kind of answered this, but we'll still discuss it. Why is it important to read books that illustrate Black love and joy? And we'll start with Deborah.
I think it's important to read books that show Black love, Black joy, Black girl magic, and Black boy joy, as they call it. Um, because while every story needs to have kind of the rising actions, what we call it when you teach English, you don't necessarily have to have something that is world encompassing. It's like it's not having a couple who meet each other and are going to, fix racism or, things like that. Sometimes it's just that you meet someone and you feel that tension and the stories about that. And that's really interesting, I think. And it also involves going into a microcosm where it's not the outside world, it is the relationship between those two people. And I think it's important to read that not because people are missing anything from their own lives, but just because it is really beautiful to see. Love in any aspect is beautiful to see. So this is basically just showing just another aspect of that. I think it's important, and I'm sure Maya and Belinda will mention this as well, is that not everything has to be struggle, or if it is struggle, it is something that you take joy in working on together. And those relationships in the books do that. It's not necessarily someone coming in to pick you up. So it's not the male coming in to save the day. It's not the female coming in and kind of being so strong that, nobody can catch up to her. It is that you are, as they say, yoking yourself together with someone. That's the story most people want to hear. I will tell you that I don't read as many romance novels as I used to because I got married and I didn't necessarily feel I needed that story anymore. So I do think that has a real world effect. It is something that people feel that they need and they'll read and they hopefully will manifest in their own life. So we want people to manifest joy and not struggle all the time.
Good. Good thoughts. Maya, your response, please.
It is important to books to illustrate Black love and Black joy, because sometimes that's what we need, because these last couple of years have been hard with the pandemic, with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with Mother Emanuel, with God knows it's been hard these last couple of years. And seeing that is seeing that, there are people, despite all of this, we can still have love. We can still have joy. It's incredible that all of this is that we got to keep, going. Despite all in that, despite all of this, we still have love. And I think it's also not only important to us as African Americans to see that. It is important for other people of other cultures and nationalities to see that, because they can relate to us and say, hey, they experience the same things that we do. And I think that is a beautiful thing that we're seeing. And we're also seeing more African American books in that experience love and joy. And I'm seeing like little comments saying that they're also seeing Black love and Black joy also keeps the fires burning in their love lives. So, hey, maybe you read something hot and you pass it on to your husband or your lover or your wife. So, I think it's very important for us to
Watch out,
read.
Maya.
to read these kind of books.
Awesome. And Belinda, you'll give us the final response to that question, please.
It's overdue. People think Black love and Black joy is something that's new. It is not new. We've had to do Black love and Black joy to protect ourselves from people calling from anti-Blackness. We had to stop it. And Black love and Black joy is showing other races, other people that you can try to knock us down. You can try to kick us where you want to go, but we know who we are. If we had to use spiritual songs during slavery, what makes you think we're going to stop from there and not come up and do Black joy? Black joy and Black love is God telling us we are worthy, we are of value. Nobody's saying you're not. There's some of you who are not, but that's a different story. But we need that, and it is overdue. We need more Black love and Black joy, not just to show um, other races and other cultures, but to show each other.
Awesome, Belinda. Awesome. Um, Belinda, you talked a little bit about the impact of Terry McMillan. Um, and I would just say here that she paved the way for, I think, a whole generation of writers. I think we could maybe give her credit too for moving Black characters into the mainstream. And something that I remember about that time was that it spawned a litany of novels that were about sisterhood, and you saw the girlfriends trope in a lot of books. And I think she contributed overall to a shift in popular cultural consciousness.
Yeah.
And here we had the visibility of the female Black middle class identity introduced to the interior world. Her novels introduced us to the interior world of Black women professionals who were successful. But at the same time, some of them were available, they were alone, and they were unhappy. And that was a different perspective. But she helped create a literary tradition that demands respect for writers of color and for their characters. And pictured with her are several other authors. I think maybe for the sake of time, because we want to make sure that we have time for any questions from our audience, I can forego the final question, which was going to be about the impact of these authors on who are considered non-romance authors, but they are Black authors who have incorporated romance and relationships in their works, their impact on the world. So I'm going to just move ahead a little bit, and then I'll come back to this slide for a reason. Give me just a moment. So we do have a bibliography that we're going to drop a link to in the chat. Some articles that were very helpful to us in developing this presentation, and I think you'll enjoy reading them. That will be dropped in the chat. We have a Spotify playlist about Black romance and the Black female in fiction that we're going to drop in the chat. And I wanted to mention this date and ask everyone to save the date, February the 16th, 2022 at 2 p.m. The Charleston County Public Library will be hosting For the Love of Writing. Black women writers speak on passion for the pen, publishing, and libraries. And it will feature Trice Hickman, LaJill Hunt, and Electa Rome Parks. And I believe one of the panelists will drop the link for that to register for that, it will be through the Zoom platform, in the chat as well if you're interested in that. And then finally, we want to give a special thanks to the Black Ink um, Festival. Savannah Frierson, you are a rock
Yes.
star, girl. We love you. We thank you for inviting us and to be a part of this. And of course, our very own Charleston County Public Library, who allow for us to be a part of this, and the Charleston Friends of the Library. I'm going to go back real quick a moment. We thought this would be fun to do with the audience, and so I know that this is the age of cell phones and all that. So quickly take a screenshot with your laptop or your device, however you're viewing it with your phone, of the pictures. And the first person that can name these authors in alphabetical order by their last name, I want you to send me an email. So Maya, drop my email in the chat, please. The first person that can name these 14 Black authors, alphabetical order by their last name, we're going to have a generous prize for you from Belinda and Turning Page Bookstore, and also a prize from Charleston County Public Library. So I'll give it just a second for folks to look at that, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see me and we can continue the conversation. Okay. And all right. And I okay. Just all right. Thank you. All right. So, do we have anything in the Q&A? Oh, I don't see anything. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and drop some links in the chat for the things that I was referring to, like the bibliography. We did a timeline that sort of gives the history of, it's a very sort of sketchy history, but one that we sort of came up with of romance fiction. I'm going to drop that. And I see that there is, okay, we have a few questions coming in. So I'm going to defer to the panelists. Oh, thank you, Savannah. They're all right there on the screen from Tanya Todd. Who are some contemporary authors you recommend, authors who are getting it right? And so I'm going to defer to the other panelists, please.
Whew.
Belinda, you own a bookstore. What's hot
God,
now?
please don't start with me. I mean, I sell books all day long.
So Maya. Okay. We'll come back to you. Maya, can you, you're an adult services librarian.
Yes. There is a lot in the end. People don't realize there is a huge independent Black romance movement going on right now. And there's a lot of them who do it and do it well. Gerald had Christina Jones on his slide. I like Tay Russ. She wrote one book called I think I think Between the Books or In the Books or something. It was a book publicist who was the female character in the book, and a bookstore owner, and they got together. So that's one. Nicole Falls is pretty good as well. And a website I would recommend for y'all for like the contemporary, mostly independent, is Girl Have You Read? And they not only cover the independent romance, they also cover the Harlequin stuff. Let me warn you, it's usually black guy, black girl, or they also do LGBTQ as well. But most of they usually focus on that both are African American. So they let me see, as in terms of um, one I do like is Farrah Rashan. I really like the Boyfriend Project series. So the third one is coming out later this year, but the other two are out now. Is about three friends who met when they were seeing the same guy, and then each individual person does find romance, of course, with another dude. Duh. So I think that those are pretty good, but I know people's like, oh, you can just look it up on the internet, but as librarians, and we know that that can be hard to do, and you can get overwhelmed. Um, so I think, girl, have you read? I think there's Romance in Color is also a good website to go on as well. Um, that's what I have. Those are who are doing that right now. So I'll hush and let Belinda and Deborah answer the question.
I'm actually going to defer to Belinda. I have some comments about some other sources for things that you want to read that you can find, but not any specific title. So I'm going to let Belinda speak first if she would like to.
Well, you want me to give you some contemporary romance Black authors? That list is amazing. And the websites and the blogs that Maya recommended is good. It's really good. It's huge. Well, of course, one of the closest romance writer I'm going to recommend, of course, is Savannah. I think all of her books are good. Not just because I know her and she's from Charleston, but I like her stories. They're not fluffy, but they're really just across the board. Anybody, any color can read them. Um, oh my God! See, I like the old books. Beverly Jenkins. I mean, who can go wrong with that? Anything by the lady who wrote the Alice Anna B. Ross. Man, she's got a character in there, Musama. I can't. Yeah, he's
Oh,
good.
you always
He's
talk about Brenda and
the
Brenda Jenkins.
Westmoreland men.
Yes, you love the
You
Westmoreland men.
cannot go wrong with those Westmoreland men and their cousins and their second cousins. You can read that. It'll take you a year to just read that series. Brenda Jackson. Yeah, this the list can go on, but I would start with every book by Beverly Jenkins is good. Now, and a lot of her books is during the 18th and early 19th century. So there was romance back there. Uh, Elin Harris. I mean,
Yes.
he has passed away, but his books still sell. Um, Omar Tyree, Fly Girl, even though that book came out in the 80s,
90s. Because I
90s,
was in
yeah,
high school.
it's people are still buying it because it's even more relevant today than it was in the 90s.
And to piggyback what you said about Elin, I've been thinking about lately how revolutionary that was what he was writing in the 90s. And it's sad. I mean, and that was very forward thinking for them to be like you, Belinda. You talked about the Belinda. You talked about the seeing people on the bus reading
Hmm.
Terry. I was in the hairdresser, same hairdresser I didn't have for the last 25 years, people were reading Elin and the Hairdresser.
Oh yeah, because
And
he was delivering his books to hairdresser salons and beauty barbershop salons in Washington D.C. and New York and Atlanta before he became big. I mean, the book is amazing. It really is. It's the funny thing. Books by these African Americans that did not get to do they were due are now getting to do their due, and they should,
exactly.
because those stories covers centuries, just
Yeah.
centuries.
So, and we're
My,
starting to see a little bit more and back to like the LBGT, because I know there's an LBGT African American romance that's being printed by Berkeley within the next couple of months.
Hmm.
And I think the author is Kosovo Jackson, I believe. And I can see the cover, but I can't think of the name of the book right now. And that's I
The
think that will
Queen
be
is
their,
Mine.
huh?
The Queen is Mine's the cover with the
It's two black guys and
yeah,
their hearts in the background.
yeah.
Um,
Maya, real
yes.
quick, if I can interject, we've got a few unanswered questions in the
Okay.
Q&A. Let me
Go
just
right
throw
ahead,
them out to
Gerald.
you all real quickly. This is from Mel Walker. He wanted to know, which contemporary author do you recommend when it comes to their portrayal of Black female characters? So just shoot some titles and authors out real quick for that,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Like I said, Christina Jones, Tay Russ, Farrah Rashan, um, Jasmine Guillory. Somebody mentioned Alexa Martin. I had like Prisha Williams, like book The Low Country Ride, that was based here in Charleston. Blah, blah, blah. Nicole Falls.
Yeah.
Um, pretty much, yeah.
And then we have a question from Shirley Davidson. How many Black owned publishers are available for Black writers? Does anyone know of any Black owned publishing houses
Yes.
that may
Yes.
be available? Valinda, could you give us some?
There's one in Atlanta, New York. I have the list. It's less than 12 or 15. I can look for the list, Gerald, and send it to you, of Black publishers.
Yeah.
Okay,
Some
all
of them
right.
And
are imprints of others. HarperCollins has three. One is Quill Tree Books, and Ingram has four. Some of them are imprints of other big publishing houses. And I can send you that list of Black publishing houses.
yeah, and Ta-Nehisi
Are there any
Coates' dad
last?
has a
Go
publishing
ahead, Mike.
company,
Okay.
Paul Coates.
Um, I think we got a minute left, guys. So any last comments before we? I just want to tell you all, thank you. You were a wonderful panel. But then, do you all have any last comments?
I just want to throw this in there because Maya and Belinda are the experts on the specific titles and publishing houses. But one thing I do suggest folks try is Black Tumblr has many, many, many up and coming authors who discuss this very thing. Very, very detailed, really great analysis, actually. So I would check there. I also highly suggest, I know this is very strange for some people, fan fiction. There are a lot of, again, really great up and coming Black authors who are writing entire novels, 75,000 word novels on Archive of Our Own or fanfiction.net. So if you're looking for something like really new, that is also a good place to check. And what I like about fan fiction folks is they tend to be the best in some cases at writing great relationships where people respect each other and they have consent, which is very sexy,
Yes,
of
they
course,
do.
and great
Yes, they do.
characterization. So if you're looking for something that's not a mainstream, I would try there as well.
That is an
Very
excellent
good.
website. I mean, it is amazing. Some of the writing in there, amazing.
Oh yeah, Savannah
All
just
right,
put one at
ladies.
two.
This You
Yeah.
all did an awesome job, and I think that we are about to end. So thank you again to
Thank
everyone.
you,
Thank you to
Gerald.
our audience.
Carol.
You all have been great. Oh,
Thank
Savannah.
you.
Okay, stay put. Okay.
Well, I think she's telling us to stay put.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Technology. All right.
Technology.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great one, everyone.
Thank
Thanks for coming.
you. Mm-hmm.